The number of parishes in the Buffalo Catholic Diocese will be cut by a third. That is the headline from a lengthy news conference today with Bishop Michael Fisher, who said the church hasn't yet decided which parishes will be merged with others. Good evening, everyone. We all know now that the diocese faces a lot of financial difficulties stemming from Chapter 11 bankruptcy that's related to the priest abuse scandal, but that's on top of declining attendance to Mass, plus the ongoing shortage of priests. The bishop saying today that these are, quote, difficult decisions, but he said it's the best way for the diocese to move forward.
Our desire to right-size this diocese so that we can, in collaboration, emerge from Chapter 11 and, again, move forward with hope into a future where the church is still plays an important role in the people of our lives and the people of this diocese.
The bishop and his team will now begin to take recommendations on which of the more than 50 parishes will have to be merged with others. Final decisions will be made in mid to late August. Joining us live tonight with reaction and insight on all this is Michael Cimasi with me here in studio, an active parishioner here in the diocese, and Dr. Susan Tominey, Associate Professor at the Catholic University of America's School of Theology and Religious Studies. Thanks to both of you for taking some time for us this evening. And Michael, I'll start here with you and just your reaction. I mean, we were anticipating there would be dramatic change announced at this news conference today, considering what I mentioned there, the financial difficulties, the fact that a third of diocese will be merged. What's your reaction to that as someone who is active, I know, in Catholic education, but also just in the Catholic Church?
Yes, thank you. One thing I'll note after reading the press release is that I think it's important to see here that the diocese has stated that they're going to take into account parishioners' opinions and the priests' opinions as well, and this simply hasn't been a unilateral mandate. And that was a lot of the reaction before, was simply a statement of this church is now to close and this school is now to close, whereas now there's at least been a comment period, if you want to think of it administratively, and a period for the families to sort of digest this and to maybe determine what way might be best for themselves to streamline, and then present that to the diocese and have that dialogue, which I think is the only thing that any parishioners really wanted with the church, is that ability to dialogue, be heard, and with the realization that decisions have to be made ultimately, but that dialogue, I think, is very important.
Professor, let me ask you, I know that you're not intimately familiar with the Buffalo Diocese per se, but I know that this diocese isn't unique. We are dealing here with Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but there are financial constraints with the Catholic Church all over America, specifically in Buffalo. Looking at our 160 parishes, the diocese said today that there has been a 49% decline in registered households across the diocese. I mean, the numbers here are difficult, right? Are we unique, and what trends can you tell us that we're seeing across the country?
I'd be happy to do that. You're not unique. The most recent authoritative study that came out shows about a 9% decrease across the country in the number of parishes. And I think the things that Bishop Fisher pointed to are things that have been unique in all of the dioceses, primarily in the Northeast and Midwest, who are facing that. And that is three: the combination of declining attendance with fewer number of priests available for active ministry. But I think the third one is also really important, and that is a desire for the vitality of the worship experience. It's not a good experience to walk into a church that's a third or a half empty, to not see young families, to not see children being baptized. And so I think it's important to say that part of this is the desire to create places that will be welcoming and warm and enable people to worship.
Michael, I know that you're very focused on schools and how this could potentially impact them. There was a Q&A that the church put out today trying to answer some of the questions. And on the question of schools, it says as this process goes forward, parishes with existing elementary schools will be evaluated just as parishes without schools will be evaluated. There is also sort of a separate process happening at the same time with schools. How concerned should we be about that aspect of this?
Well, I believe the diocese has been very straightforward with the schools in the diocese about what the metrics should be and what financial stability and health is. And I think all the schools are individually working to try and bring their enrollments up and manage their own financial matters. I think that there have been some interesting developments in the diocese recently. For example, St. Peter and Paul in the family of parishes that I belong to in Amherst announced a new model for the next school year where they're going to be focusing on a Catholic liberal arts traditional education model and the like G.H. Chesterton, model. So it's a different product. So the diocese is starting to sort of think outside the box a little, or at least allow the families and the pastors to think outside the box a little, outside of the normal brand of Catholic education and parochialism. Not that either of those things are bad, but obviously we're talking about change. So,
absolutely. Professor, let me go back to you and ask, looking forward, obviously some dioceses have already done this sort of right sizing that our bishop is talking about now. Is this sort of the typical model that's happening around the country, or are there places in which, you know, a diocese has come up with a unique way of dealing with the financial problems without, you know, kind of turning to what I'm sure everyone would like to avoid, which is just to merge parishes?
Yeah, I think the merging really needs to take place, because I think in most cases, the reality is we have too many parish buildings and plants for the number of people in the parishes, or even the number of people in the diocese. What I was really glad to hear Michael say is that the process is beginning with listening to the people. So I think of what dioceses have learned over the last 15 years, if there's a good way and a best way to do it, it begins with asking people first to reflect on their experience, to reflect on what they think are the needs of their parish, of the parishes in their local community. And then from there to be able to create something that will be creative, that will respond to what it is the people are looking for. So in that case, I think that the Diocese of Buffalo has a really good chance to be able to learn from what other dioceses have done, who are maybe 3 years or 5 years or even 10 years into this process of merging and of creating parish families.
Yeah, and we heard today, I mean, some of that was just delayed by the fact that we went through the pandemic, and obviously Bishop Fisher hasn't been here for that long when you compare to some other parishes. Michael, let me just end by asking you, you know, there was this letter that was sent by a couple of parishioners to the Pope asking for Bishop Fisher to be replaced. And part of the criticism has been that there's been such a focus on the finances of the church and on dealing with this sort of crisis that there hasn't been much of a ministry within the Buffalo Diocese. Do you think that this plan, and especially once implemented moving forward, is that the way forward to get back to what the church is ultimately supposed to be about?
Well, I think it's important to remember from a religious perspective that, you know, man is fallible, and all the structures that we create are fallible, so nothing perfect is ever going to come out of humanity, sure, including the way we organize our own churches. However, the ministry of the church is continued, and I should hope that through this we will end up with a stronger, more compact unit, because clearly there are too many buildings and not enough people.
Yeah, that's really what the bottom line comes down to. Although difficult for people in parishes that they've spent their whole lives there and may have to move, but that's sort of the reality. Thank you so much to both of you, Michael Cimasi and Professor Susan Tominey from the Catholic University of America. Thanks to both of you for your insight and perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.